Welcome to our midweek Bible study. We are in Matthew chapter 7, verse 9, about to wrap up the Sermon on the Mount, and that's going to be quite the accomplishment. Then we'll leap into the stories of Jesus' life in the rest of Matthew. Please, if you could for us, make sure you are subscribed, that you hit the like and the bell. All the bell does is it gives you a notification that a new video is available. It doesn't start the video. It doesn't push the video to your phone. It just lets you know it's there, so you don't miss one. And our midweek Bible studies seem to be really appreciated, but it's the least viewed of our videos during the week. So subscribing, liking, sharing, all of that will help us get further out. And we would love to do that. We would love to get the story of Jesus out there more and more and more. That said, let's get started in Matthew chapter 7. Now, verses 7 and 8 are those very famous ask, seek, and knock. Because if you ask, it'll be given to you. If you seek, you'll find. The one who knocks, the door will be opened. So he's talking about God's responding to us. And then he wants to reassure us of the goodness of God. Now, goodness is a complicated subject, frankly. When we think of goodness, we generally think of niceness, and that means more of a grandparent than a father in heaven. We all know that there are differences between fathers and grandfathers, that for the most part, painting with a wide brush here, grandfathers let the kids get away with a lot more, and they may even give a lot more to the kids, but it might not always be good for them, whereas fathers are more of a gatekeeper, and they have to make sure that what is given to the child is actually good for the child. Good for the child. So with that proviso, let's take a look at what Jesus says about the gifts God gives us. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Already did that. Hang on, verse 9. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. So much here. First of all, there was a give and take here that we don't see, but we can see the effect of. I'll get to that. When Jesus said, even though you are evil, there would have been laughter and smile in the group, because in the group you had Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, and such, whose all the talk was evil, evil, evil. And Jesus comes back and talks about the love of God for us, and not so much the fear of God, although Jesus does talk about that, obviously, in other places. He stresses the love of God, and that God is love. There would have been a going back and forth. And so he says, all right, now, you're all terrible people, but if your son asks for bread, will you give him a rock? If he asks for a fish, were you going to give him a snake that would endanger him? God, if you're evil and you still know better than that, why would you think God's going to trick you and give you bad things or things that are bad for you? Now, we would all absolutely love a grandfather in heaven. We would all absolutely love a great cosmic vending machine that we could just tell God what we wanted and we got that. And we would tell him what we don't want and we wouldn't get that. And there are a whole lot of things that happen on this planet I cannot explain. And I can't answer your question. Why did God allow this? Or why did God not do this? I can't answer those questions. I don't know. And I'm right there in the same boat with you, wondering, why didn't God act? Or why did God do that instead of this? We, being limited information beings, we're human beings, and therefore we have limitations. We have intake devices. We've got our eyes, nose, skin. We've got our mouth for taste, ears for hearing. We're able to pick up information and process information, but our brains are not designed to know everything or to be able to see everything. For example, a bird, if you've got pet birds or you got birds in your yard, they see colors you can't see. They see and they hear sounds you can't hear. And their sense of time is different than yours. That's why they can fly through the woods and not run into a tree. Where if we tried to go that fast through the trees, we wouldn't. Our brains are designed to be perfectly suited for us to be human beings. But that doesn't mean we see what God sees. And that's very, very frustrating. And I'm not saying these things to you so that you just sit back and go, well, the tornado took our house, but I'm sure God's got a great plan there. I don't know what's going on when the tornado hits your house. I don't. I don't know why God didn't steer it around. I don't know why he didn't put the tornado out in the middle of somewhere that had no structure at all. I cannot answer those questions. What I can say is that we don't have all the information. And Jesus is asking us to trust God, that he will do the right thing. And let me tell you something. That's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask from anybody. And he's asking it from everybody. So I'm aware of it. And if your faith struggles from time to time with some of these things, it's all right. God knows that. That's why he called his people Israel, those who struggle with God or those who wrestle with God. It's part of our upbringing. It's part of our learning. We know that this life is not all that there is and that something is beyond this life, and it's not standing on a cloud playing a harp. There's going to be work involved. There's going to be, and we're going to love it, whatever it is, but it's going to be busy. This is a time of preparing, and it's a time of ignorance. We don't know a lot of things. Will we be faithful in the middle of the storm when we don't know how the story is going to turn out? I like to read mysteries and thrillers. It's nice to take a break from reading nonfiction from time to time. And when you get a good author, you know, all right, this book's probably going to be pretty good. You like the characters. They're not reprehensible. They're identifiable. One thing I do is I go and see how many pages are in the book. And I do that. I don't read the last chapter. I've heard of people that do that. I don't really understand that. I just see how many pages are there. And then I go, all right, now I know the progression. I don't know how I kind of know how the story's going to turn out because it's a continuing character. They're not going to die. It's going to be, I don't know how it's all going to twist, but I know it's going to be resolved in the next 80 pages. By the way, I do that with nonfiction too. Maybe a book about the multiverse or a book about some aspect of physics or the like. I'll look at the page and then I'll, 2/3 of the way through or something, I'll think, they've only got this much time left to make their point. We don't know when the last page is. Not of our life, not of the lives of the people we love, or the lives of, the life of the planet. We don't know. And so we don't know where we are in the story. I've brought this up before, but there is this myth that the American soldiers, Marines, airmen, and Navy personnel who served in Vietnam came back more broken than any other army that went out. And that's just not true. The suicide rate, depression rate, and alcoholism rate of those in World War II was greater than the Vietnam veterans. Why? The best we can figure is this. Whenever somebody was sent to Vietnam, and we're not talking about the war, whether you approve of the war or not, any war or not, we're just talking about psychology here. When they were sent to Vietnam, they had a come home by. It was 12 months in country, 18 months in country, maybe 24 months in country, and that would be a tour. They'd be rotated out, and they may rotate back. But they knew there was a date, not a date certain, because when you're in the military, things move about. But you had the idea of when you were coming back. When soldiers went into World War II, nobody knew when that was going to end. So you were in for the duration without knowing how many pages were in that book, shall we say. That stress is great. And so I do not discount it when people come up to me. upset with God, disappointed with God, angry with God, furious with God. And I don't tell them, you're a bad person, just have faith, repeat after me, God is good all the time God is good. I don't do any of that. I let them rage. I've read the Psalms. God can take it. I've read the book of Job. God can take it. And then we find a way to come to peace with the fact that we're not running the universe. We are not God. We are creatures. We are not the creator. And sometime, even though it may bring us to the breaking point, we need to trust that God is good, even when good doesn't feel good, even when we don't understand why. And deal with the fact that we are limited in what we know and limited in what we can know. If that does not satisfy you deeply, good. You're getting the point. It's not about us understanding. It's about us dealing with whatever's coming down the pike. And that's not easy, and I never want to minimize it. If you have struggles, we get it. I get it. That's why we wrestle with God. And then he talks about the golden rule, or gives us the golden rule. Now, there have been people who have done a lot of PhD dissertations on the golden rule, and it's really fascinating. Versions of this do predate Jesus. And Jesus never anywhere in here says, I'm making up something brand new. Nobody has ever said this. So, got that. But Jesus is the one who made it prominent and put it into this form. It's amazing how many had it the other way around. Whatever people do to you, do also to them. And I'm going, it could go wrong in an awful lot of ways. And there were other versions of it, but when Jesus speaks it in this way, it became part of not only our culture, but the world's understanding of what it means to be a good person. Do to somebody else what you wish they would do to you. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then he says, this sums up the law and the prophets. Well, that would have rattled their cage. Please remember, you go back to Matthew chapter 5, when we looked at it, that Jesus said, you've heard it said, but I say. You've heard it said, but I say. He did that 5 times. He is summarizing and recasting the law. And it is all about love. God is all about love. That love will have some limits when it comes to behavior. It will have some limits in the way that, or put limits on us. For example, God doesn't speak a lot about how many shirts you're allowed to own, or if you're allowed to have a car that has this many seats, or he doesn't do that. What he does say is love one another, love God, and do to others as you would have them do unto you, which would mean, once again, let's be careful about not overspending on us when people have needs, and we can help them with their needs. It's all about love being the guardrails of every decision we make. Let's go. Enter, because this is going to be a big one. You ready? I hope you're sat down well and comfortable. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Versions matter. We talk about this in our Monday morning messages back in May. When I was growing up, it said straight is the way, and straight was S-T-R-A-I-T, which, if you're not a native English speaker, it means a twisted road that goes around the obstacles. Well, the NIV and several of the modern versions have decided that that is just not understood. And so they punted, and they're saying small is the gate and narrow the road. They're just trying to get the concept across. What's the concept? Well, if you were to ask, 99% of Christians would respond that only a few people are going to heaven. Let's talk about that briefly, shall we? because I've talked about it on Monday morning messages when we talked about universalism, about God sending Christ to die for all of us, and in sermons on why I'm not a Calvinist, and with the idea that God only died for the elect. He only gave his plan for the elect, and all the others were born literally to burn for eternity. Here, let's just cut through. You ready to skip past 6 months of hard work here? You can listen to those, learn from those. But here's a clue. When God talks about the kingdom of heaven, when God talks about entering this joyful place, he's not always talking off-site. In fact, he's generally talking about here. Few will truly find the joy of the Lord here. More will not see it. They're going to be distracted by the easy road. They take the easy road. And the fact is, taking the easy road makes for crooked rivers, crooked trees, and crooked people. You need to take the hard road sometimes. I can remember at times being faced with a very difficult subject. And I might be 13 or 14, and I'm being introduced into realms of geometry or algebra or chemistry that it was just going to be a big challenge. And I would say something, I only said it a couple times because I learned, this is really hard. And my dad would say, and that's the point. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to challenge you. You're supposed to have difficulty with this. And that's why we give people master's degrees, because they have mastered the subject. And we want to recognize that they have done that. But it doesn't help to master, wrestling a Kleenex to the floor. It has to be something hard. Being hard is the point. When we hit something hard, the temptation is always there to retreat. To say, well, that's not for me. I play guitar. I love guitar. It kind of centers me. It allows me to kind of be at peace whenever I'm at the end of a day or the like. Many people have come to me and said, oh, I want to play guitar. I would love to play guitar. I've tried to play guitar. And I know what's coming next. I've lost track of the so many people who have then said, but it hurt my fingers and I stopped. Well, that's the thing. You got to let it hurt your fingers, and then you got to keep going. Because if you keep going, it stops hurting your fingers. But if you stop, you will never be able to do the hard thing that you really want to do. And yeah, after you've done it for a while, it looks really easy. Frankly, it is kind of easy after you've done it for a while, but it's hard at first. It's the same thing with anything worthwhile. And establishing and living out the kingdom of heaven in our lives and around us on this planet is hard. At other times, it'll become instinctual. It'll become our go-to. Love will be our go-to response. It'll be like a reflex, like the old days when the doctor would hit your knee with a hammer and, it kind of your leg would kind of flap a bit. I'm not sure what they were checking for back then. I think they were just having fun, but I don't know that anybody does that anymore except neurologists. But it'd be just a reflex. This happens, love response. Those people are the few. Those are the ones who found it. They've worked their way through all of the obstacles. But the point I'm really wanting to make to you right now is that these passages that were used to indicate that God had this incredible plan to create the universe, to bring his people upon it, his chosen people of God, then to bring Jesus, then to invite the Gentiles into the kingdom, and all of that only so he could save about 0.1% of all humankind, does not make earthly or heavenly sense. Makes a lot of sense if God's going to save all or most of us. But whenever you use passages like this to indicate that most people are going to, by far, the majority of people, are going to be completely lost, and only a few people are going to make it. It seems to make this the least efficient plan ever launched. Until you realize it's not talking about eternal life. It's talking about this life. It's talking about being in this life and doing this life right. Then it makes sense. It also clears up some other things. Back in the days in America where slavery was legal, that horrible, horrible evil of slavery, there were preachers who would preach to the slaves, but they would tell them they just had to be faithful slaves. They just had to be good where they were, because one day, all by and by, it would all be okay. Many preachers did actively work for abolition of slavery, but the majority of people still thought this earth is suffering, heaven will be good. We're called to make this earth more like heaven, to make the kingdom of heaven a reality in our everyday. Do you remember the prayer of Jesus he just gave? Let your kingdom come. That doesn't mean let the end of the world happen. It means let's be the kingdom now, right here, right now. We had a tornado come through recently as of when I'm recording this. It'll be a month in the past by the time you listen to it. And I had a whole lot of people blowing up my phone. Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay? We were okay. We were okay. We were missed by 7 or 8 miles. I'm not exactly sure, but it was around that. And we don't have a lot of reports right now about anybody else damaged, but we know that our safe harbor people were safe, those in this region. And I had people, asking, all right, are you okay? Are you scared? And I'm going, no, there's no fear. I wish there had not been a tornado, but this gives us an opportunity to love on our neighbors. Be the kingdom of heaven. See, now most people are going to see the storms, and they're going to be afraid of the storms. They're going to question the why of the storms, all legitimate, by the way. But then that's where they stop. Some will donate, water or wood or even their own labor, which is all great, absolutely. But most will go on about their lives. If the kingdom of heaven is here, in your heart, your first thought is, this is an opportunity to love my neighbor. This is an opportunity to give. This is an opportunity to do without so that others may have. And few are going to take that path. God says doing that on this earth is finding the kingdom of heaven is worth it. Absolutely worth it. Even if it's not strictly required for you to be saved in the end, it's worth it. And it makes your Father happy. And who doesn't want to make God happy? We'll move on. He says, watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit. A bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. Well, a lot of people try to use this to negate the first of chapter 7, judge not that you be not judged. No, he's saying God created you to see patterns. See patterns. For example, if you were to hear that a religious community that was kind of shadowy, people don't really know much about it, but had bought a bunch of property near you, and it's led by a guy who's teaching them secrets of life, and people are, you meet some of the members, and they have this kind of glassy-eyed, he has just shown me everything about myself. It's just, excuse me, the wonder of it all is just so beautiful. And, I gave him all my money, and now I used to be this, that, the other. Now I just sit at his feet and, I clean the house and such. And You already know where this is going. It's already going to go into sexual sin and assault. It's already going to go into the misuse of money, the abuse of power, the abuse of people. You already know, because that's what cults always do. They always go that way. Whether it's Jim Jones or whether it's any other, they always go that direction. What's the fruit of what they are doing? And then avoid doing that. Don't get hooked in with that person. There are people that go about claiming that they are from God, and they split families, and they split churches, and they create new problems, and all the time saying, well, I'm just speaking the truth from God, and that's your problem. No, you know something? If you leave a trail of destruction in your wake, there's something wrong here. I had a very good friend named David. I have several good friends named David now. They're none of these. This is back in West Virginia where I lived, and he was co-owner of a gun shop that I went to frequently and visited with people there and went to the shooting range because we did shooting competitions. Well, David one day looked at me and he grinned and he said, you going to congratulate me? And I said, why? And he said, I'm going to get married Friday. And I went, oh, David. You see, this is going to be his third or fourth marriage. I'm not sure which one. And he said, what? And I said, wouldn't you just be better off if every 10 years you found a woman that hated you and you just bought her a house? You would be better off than this. And he's going, no, this lady was, I said, Dave, I don't know anybody you've married. I've never met one of them. But I will say this, I know one common denominator in all of this. So what have you done to make sure that it doesn't happen again? He didn't have much of an answer for it. I'm not trying to tell you that if you're on your third, fourth, or fifth marriage, that you are doomed and broken and you're an evil person. What I am saying is there comes a time where you have to say, there is a common denominator, and it is me. What am I doing wrong, and what can I do to correct it? Then you're all golden. We can, with God, every day is a restart. You can clean slate it and move forward. But it's the same with certain teachers and preachers. If they're always yelling and always mad and you're always bad, what kind of fruit is that producing? It's a fair question. By their fruit, you recognize them. Well, wait a minute. What if they claim to be doing great things for God? So glad you asked. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Once again, this is generally taught as they're not going to go to heaven. Totally different thing. Or they're not going to be saved. Totally different thing. They're not going to enter the place where God needs them to be on this planet. The only one who does the will of my Father is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, this will be judgment day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? In your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? So yeah, they were able to do some really impressive stuff. Jesus didn't say so-called miracles. He said miracles. He said, then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. And once again, I would ask you to go to our Safe Harbor Church on YouTube. Look down and in the search box that searches just our channel and put in the word hell. And you'll see it's 4 or 6 Mondays in a row, we looked at the concept of hell. And then type in universalism, and a few will pop up. Have a listen to those. I do not believe that God has destined the majority of humankind to burn for eternity in a torture pit. I believe that those words mean something different, and I'm not alone in that. In fact, the mainstream of Christianity believed that for several hundred years before Nicaea, Chalcedon, and some other big conferences began to move it toward a different way of thinking. And then the medieval church took it all the way back to a Platonic view of the afterlife and a horrible hell and the like. So it's so hard to untwist this knot, though, isn't it? It really is. I do believe that people will be refined by fire. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that feels like. That's information that was never given to us. But Jesus is not warning us here of billions of years of hell because we got something wrong in our church. No. He's saying just doing great things, they may not be great. Look behind you to see if there are wrecked lives, broken relationships, hurt people, not just a few, but that seems to be the fruit of your life. Well, then there's a problem. There's a real problem there. And he's asking us not to judge other people, but to check ourselves and then to look for patterns and to go where the pattern shows most likely good will be done. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain came down, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. Every church person right now is hearing the song in their head, aren't you? They're doing this. House upon the rock. We all did that. And it was a very good lesson. So it's in your head now, and I can't help you. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When I lived in Colorado, I've lived there twice. The first time I lived there is when I met my wife there. And during that courtship time, the church that she attended started another church, a new church where the city was expanding rapidly. And people had moved out to this brand new subdivision. But later on, people started noticing in their homes cracks, big cracks, problem cracks, foundations breaking. They had not properly prepared the foundation for the people's homes in the new subdivision. It became a great scandal. Always check your footing. What is your foundation? Whenever I talked about shooting competitions, these were not some sort of militia type training. These are target, accuracy, distance, time things. Just another game, but involving firearms and done under supervision with a lot of timers and safety guys and all the other. Whenever you do that sort of work, one of the things that you sometimes have to do if you're an IDPA or the like is you have to move. Shoot and move. Sometimes shoot while moving. And one of the things they train is your feet, your foundation, solid. Watch how you move. You don't cross your feet. You don't, as you're moving back and forth, how to keep a foundation. I'm told the same thing occurs in things like judo and jiu-jitsu. The same thing occurs in building a building and in life. What is your foundation? Here I'm going to get really technical, but then we're going to pick it up again next week, okay? Not technical, a little heartbreaking. A lot of my life is built around my grandkids. But every year, I'm going to have less in common with my grandkids. Now, they're still going to love me, and I'm absolutely going to adore them, but they're going to have less reason to run to my house because I won't have and do what they have and do. And then they're going to get married, and they're going to have kids, and they're going to be busy. So if my foundation in life is I play with my grandkids, that's going to be shaky. It can be absolutely one of the pillars of my life, and I'm proud to say it is. But the foundation has to be something which isn't going to move. Every marriage ends, either in death or divorce. So that can't be the foundation. What is your foundation? If your foundation is a nation, sorry. All nations fall eventually. Maybe not during your lifetime or your great-grandkids' lifetimes, but all nations fall. So there is only one foundation laid. and that is Jesus Christ. So, between now and next week, check your foundation. What are you standing on? Do you have something solid to stand on? We'll pick up that discussion next week. Thank you. God bless.